First of all, good morning. Welcome to the Private Equity Power Breakfast. This is our first Private Equity Power Breakfast. We have been doing these Power Breakfasts probably on a quarterly basis, and we've gotten great feedback. And actually, this was feedback from a panelist on our last Finance and Accounting Power Breakfast that said you should do one around private equity. We said, absolutely. Him and I met several times. Unfortunately, he had a family emergency and couldn't be here, but that's why you'll see Keith Weidman up here, but I'm sitting not up on my panel. But thank you for taking time out of your busy days or busy schedules to join us, share your insights and perspectives on the ever-evolving PE landscape. We want to hear from attendees. We want questions. Hopefully this can be interactive. At AccruePartners, we provide talent solutions that support your human capital and workforce needs across direct hire, strategic initiatives, and project consulting. As part of our commitment to the business community, we host quarterly industry events to create opportunities for leaders and to connect, exchange insights on emerging topics, and build meaningful connections. Through our partnerships, we've had the opportunity to support many of your organizations with talent pipelines and project initiatives. Thank you to our fantastic panel, who will be introduced momentarily, and Ben Hicks, the moderator, who will be facilitating today's discussion. Thank you, Ben, for leading the conversation. And lastly, thank you to our event partner, Robbie Shaw, who unfortunately couldn't be here, and Everybody Studios, a full-service podcast and video production studio, which AccruePartners uses to produce our own podcast. I know everyone follows that and has been tuning in. Everybody Studios works with Charlotte Business Journal, Ortho Carolina, Indigo Road Hospitality, UBS Wealth Management, for students, nonprofit, and many others to elevate their brand through podcasts and other video production. So if you're interested in speaking to them about services, talk to AJ Shelby, who's here today. He's doing some B-roll and some video for our marketing and to promote some of our future events. We'll plan for a 40 to 45-minute discussion covering a few key topics, and now I'll hand it over to Ben Hicks to kick us off.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Ben Hicks. I'm an attorney at Wagner Hicks. We're a business law firm. I primarily do corporate transactional work, so private equity, M&A, and investment transactions. I'm the only lawyer on the panel, and this is not a legal topic, so I'm well situated to just ask questions about things operationally that I don't understand. So we're gonna. Hello. All right, I'm just gonna talk. So I'm gonna allow the panel to introduce themselves, but before we do that, I just kind of want to set the table. Where the topic of private equity is obviously a very timely topic. My understanding is the group, you all, consist of a pretty wide variety of situations. So you may be actively already involved in private equity, wanting to learn about synergies and how to improve the way that you operate. You may be outside of private equity and wanting to hear about what is this private equity thing I hear a lot about. Seems like I've heard this or that about it, but I'm interested to hear different perspectives on what it's like to operate within a private equity overlay. So we're gonna, some of the topics we may talk about and some of the ways we frame them may seem kind of elementary depending on where you're situated. They may be really interesting and novel for the same topic. So we're kind of gonna start pretty basic, and then we're gonna expand based on how the conversation goes. So with that, I'd like to go ahead and allow the panel to introduce themselves.
Good morning. Good morning. I'm Jose Costa. I'm the CEO of Whistle Express. I've been with private equity for 16 years, 8 different firms. We're sponsored by Oaktree Capital today. It's our second ownership group with Whistle Express, and it's been a great ride.
Good morning. I'm Jennifer Cutting. I am the CFO at Jadically. I have been in PE for 10 years, and this is the start of my 5th opportunity. And we're owned by Angeles Equity.
Good morning. I'm Ellen Cartee. I serve as the CHRO for MCA. We are a mission critical communications, connectivity, and security company executing a very fast roll up strategy. So I like to talk about my experience with PE is that I started 8 years ago. We were 365 employees at about 30 locations. Today we're 1,750 employees and about 110 solution centers. So our sponsor is Sentinel Capital. And but previously, I had large public, global, publicly traded, big company experience. So it's been a fun ride. Looking forward to hearing your questions.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. Scott Beach with Aurelius Group, a Munich-based private equity firm. I'm about 10 months into my journey in private equity as operating director for digital and technology for North America. We have about 400 employees around the world focused on complex carve-outs, operational transformation on the PE side, and just raised our fifth fund that we're currently working to deploy across North America and the rest of the world.
Hi, everyone. Matt Ibbetson. I'm a partner at Ridgemont Equity Partners based here in Charlotte. We're the largest private equity firm in the Southeast. We've got about 10 billion of assets under management. We invest in healthcare, industrials, business services. We're what you would call growth equity. I'm excited to be a part of this panel today.
So I've got some questions prepared to kind of open up the discussion. We are very encouraging of follow-up questions. If you hear somebody that says something and you want to hear more about that, feel free to raise your hand. This is supposed to be very organic and collaborative, not regimented. But we're going to start with just... I might keep speaking on me. Sorry, everybody. I think we're okay. We'll see. So first question, what's it really like to work with private equity, and how is that different from working with other ownership models? So you see in the news, hear from a friend, private equity is like this, is every situation is like that. Based on your perspective, what's it really like interacting with private equity? And I guess we'll just start. We could go down the line. So Jose, why don't you start?
Yeah. So like I mentioned, 16 years, eight firms. The first one was 3G Capital, which is known as being very involved, very cutthroat. It's in the news, Kraft, Heinz, Burger King, Anheuser-Busch. There's a great book called Dethroning the King. If you want to read the story of what happened with Budweiser and Anheuser-Busch. So that was kind of like my first experience, which they threw me in the deep end of the pool. I ran Latin America and the Caribbean for Burger King, and they really taught me a lot. It was a formative experience. The partners, like Matt, came in and they were part of the management team. So we were literally working side by side. And then from there, I've seen everything in the spectrum. There's a New York-based private equity firm called AccruePartners. They own Driven Brands. And they were very much like Richmond, great partners, but I wouldn't say as involved as 3G. Then the Jordan Company and today Oaktree. Oaktree is a little bit more, I would say, on the side of 3G. So as an executive running the business, you need to adapt to the style of the private equity sponsor and be a good listener, because sometimes they're smarter than you. They have more experience. They've seen many assets. They know what they're doing. So it's a delicate dance between pushing hard on your personal agenda, what you want to do with the business, versus what they want to do with the business. When I got there 4 years ago, we had 40 units. Today, we're the largest car wash company in the country. And we would have never been able to do that without Oaktree. So that's a little bit of perspective.
And for me, similar to Jose, I've been at my fifth portfolio company that I've been working with. So 5 different sponsors over time. The one thing I will tell you, the speed and rigor of reporting is exceptionally fast, but it's making sure that the data is clean and you have a strong team to help partner with you is very key. Similarly, I've had sponsors that have been in the business, sponsors that have been arm's length away, some all, I would say, have a perspective and opinion, and not always the line between sponsor, board members, and the executive team. So making sure that you're pushing the agenda, making sure you keep alignment at all times is really important. And then also making sure that what you're reporting is accurate, and there's varying levels of accuracy depending on where you are in the hold. I tend to come in mid holds to have to clean up, make sure acquisitions have been fully integrated, and then get an ERP or a common platform in place. Each of those is a pretty heavy lift to be, in itself, but to do them all at one time gets to be a lot. So making sure that you over communicate and you think of the sponsor as a strategic partner is really important, especially for my seat as a CFO. Cash is king, as everyone knows, and everybody has different initiatives. But to me, that's been the biggest piece.
I would echo, know the investment thesis. What are they trying to accomplish? Because I think you heard it really depends on the partner, it depends on the business, it depends on where their growth strategy is going to be. And the one piece you mentioned speed, the ability to change. One of the things I loved about working at MCA is we were a different company every 6 to 9 months. And so knowing what that is, and then you have two masters. You have to make sure that you're meeting the business strategy. And at the same time, you're trying to build a great company. You're trying to figure out how do we do this at the same time we're leading the people in the right way and taking care of what they need from a organization perspective.
I think the group said some good things so far. I think what I'd add is coming from 25, 30 years working in large publicly traded and private companies, PE is a different animal to operate in. But for me, that was something I was seeking from a speed perspective, but specifically decision making. The thing that in the final interview that drew me to the role was sitting down with one of our managing partners who said, "There's no decision we can't make in a day." And coming from a large publicly traded company where it might take 12, 18 months to take an idea that you know is a good idea, and you're so tired of talking about it by the time it happens, you don't even want to do it now. To be able to say, I have an idea, here's the data, and the reinforcement to say, it's a hypothesis. We're going to change. We're going to adapt. We expect you're going to be 70%, 80% right, which means if you've made good decisions and it doesn't work out, and you base it on good data, we have to fight another day and we move on. That is not common every day in publicly traded companies, and was something that I really appreciated coming into the PE space. I echo what everyone has said. If you're sitting in a holding company or portfolio company, and you think you're just gonna like muscle over your private equity firm or ignore them, I don't recommend it. We don't go away. But to the point of knowing what you may just be misaligned on goals. You're probably right on what you want to do, but that may not align to the time frame or the outputs as it's measured by the PE firm. So just a little different than shareholder return when it's value creation for a particular holding period.
I'm at a private equity firm, so I don't know how I would describe how it's like working with me. That other than say it's amazing. But I really liked what Jose said, and that is there's a lot of private equity firms. They're not all the same. Maybe just a few frameworks to kind of like triangulate who you're working with. Is there's a spectrum of a business life cycle. There's everything from venture capitalists to growth firms to value firms to turnaround firms, and so that's one kind of framework to think about private equity firms. Another one is what's their level of involvement, and Jose gave two really good examples of that. And on one end of the spectrum you have passive investors, on the other end you have heavy-handed, and of course Richmont's right in the middle. We're collaborative. So that's another framework. I think the other one is, and maybe others can comment too, but it's just what is the time horizon, and who are their investors? That kind of drives how they think about returns and how they think about, building the business over long term. Most private equity, I would say, are kind of long-term investors, 5-7 years, but there's a mix there too. So hopefully that's helpful.
Can I add something, please? You don't have control over this one, but I think it's a key criteria when you're assessing the opportunity. And I learned this one a long time ago from the most senior guy at Harvest Partners. He said, if you're coming into a private equity opportunity and there's two owners on the board, make sure that one of them has majority. Because otherwise, when there's decision-making like they're butting their heads, it's hard to break that tie. And I saw that at Bojangles. We were owned by the Jordan Company and Durational, and it was 50-50, and it was hard. So as you're interviewing or assessing the opportunity, try to ask the right questions to make sure that one has more control than the other one, because then you know who's in charge.
Similar question. So we've heard about having more passive PE sponsors versus active. I'm curious to kind of dive in a little bit more on the flavors of what it might look like to work with different types of, or perhaps, Matt, for you, being in the perfect middle and exactly pleasurable but disciplined. But I'm curious to hear maybe more anecdotes, or so in terms of kind of communication, deliverables, especially if you've had different sponsors during the life of a company. Curious to hear about kind of different flavors of what that might look like. And Matt, why don't you kick it off, because you know the landscape very well.
Yeah, I mean, look, there's a lot there. Every private equity is a little different. For Ridgemont, we're very values oriented. We're in the Southeast. We try to differentiate ourselves from other private equity firms that are usually in New York. But being a values driven firm, that translates to how we interact. So one of our values is communicate transparently. We try to set expectations right up front, even before we do a deal. You know, it's interesting. Jennifer mentioned alignment. Scott mentioned alignment. Correct me if I'm wrong. That's so key. And we think about alignment in three ways. One is obviously economic alignment. We try to have everybody winning. Our LPs win, we win, our management teams win, frankly, our employees win. And in that, you know, if you can drive the economic alignment, by the way, that's one of the things that's great about private equity, is that you know, win-win alignment economically. But not only that, it's also the organization strategy. We try to do that up front. We are very intentional about having an onboarding process, set expectations, do that collaboratively with the business. So as an example, one of the things I do frequently is we'll do a strategy session, you know, ideally before we even close on a deal, where we align on I'm a military guy, but we align on the 3 to 5 critical battles we're going to go wage over the course of the next 5 years. And to me, that's so important, because that just sets the stage. Everyone's aligned. We move forward.
I think I'd add to that, similarly, coming from a German PE firm, we have some discipline to our structure and a way of delivering. And because we seek out hairy, complex problems, we believe, our tenet, our hypothesis is that value creation comes from being on the ground, pragmatically, in the weeds, changing companies. And you can only do that with the clarity of purpose and vision and goals. So we have our, similar to your model, you know, maybe it's 4, 5, 6 key value drivers, big, hold long opportunities that are part of our deal hypothesis. You know, maybe we need to improve some of our contracts with certain companies. We need to improve operational effectiveness. We need to manage cash better. Whatever those tenets are, they're unique and specific to that deal. There's not a one size fits all. What we do on a one size fits all is each of our functional practices, and we have them for every aspect of the business. Our experts come in with core transformational modules. These are things we do every time. You know, if you're finance, you always have a 13-week cash flow forecast process. If you're IT, you have a security review and you have a carve-out management arm. They are just part of the wallpaper, you know, of being in that company. And so I think that the fact that we lead early with that and get everyone in the company on the same page around those goals gives you something to reflect back to when someone comes to you with a new idea. Might be great, might be super innovative. How does it align to the things that the PE firm needs to achieve to satisfy the investors who put their funds with us?
I would add, it's about relationship too, right? So you have the alignment, just like you're working with your executive team, just like you're working with how you're executing your business strategy. If you have those relationships, you're going to understand, one, why are they asking for the reports they're asking for? What are they trying to accomplish? We had a small family firm, and then we went to a larger mid-cap firm, and they had different goals. And so we had to understand why they were, what were the goals? Why were they trying to approach them? What was the value creation model? But more importantly, you had to develop that relationship. So then when you got a request at 11 o'clock at night for some piece of information, you didn't want to throat punch them. You said, hey, I understand why we're trying to do this. And so just like you're building that relationship around your executive team, think about them as how are they going to ensure you're successful, and you're going to ensure they're successful too.
I'd love to see a CHRO throat punch somebody. That'd be awesome.
You don't need that.
Add as well as, there's always 20 or 30 things that need to be done at a time. So although we always tend to align on 3 to 5 core items that need to be accomplished, each of those 3 to 5 have about 20 things that are important and urgent. And so it's the rigor of the reporting, the KPIs that are measuring at what we're trying to achieve, and then always making sure that the reporting, it can change and it pivots because it will, is making sure that you can walk the data difference. So from a financial perspective, if we recorded or a forecast of, 40 million of EBITDA and all of a sudden it's 42, they want to know why and how and from what perspective. And the same thing if it drops to 32, right? There's always information that's got to be clear and concise. And so no surprises ever. I think that's pretty common in business, but in the private equity space, absolutely no surprises to a sponsor or a board. So from my seat, it's always full transparency. And even if people don't like what they're hearing, at least they're getting actual factual data.
A couple of things I would say. The frequency of the communication is critical. So we have a cadence of reports, data, and meetings. And that way they are educated and we are educated on what they get when and what we're talking about in each meeting. So for example, we know we are in the car wash business. 70% of the revenue is membership based, so there's a recharge cycle to our cash flow. When we recharge, it's usually at the end of the month when we run your credit cards. Within that first week, we sent a flash report, so they know exactly what the numbers are going to be for the previous month. Then we close the book within 10 days. We report within 15. They have the schedule. They know when it's coming. There's no surprises. That's one principle. The second principle is small problems get big really fast. So as soon as you see something, I pick up the phone and call them and tell them. We talk a lot. We were probably talking too much. So we had to trim the number of meetings, and now we have 1 2-hour meeting on Thursdays, and we update them about everything. The whole management team, we go around the horn, and they get updated about everything on Thursdays. So it's creating your own cadence, your own mechanism to keep them updated with data, surprises, and just the overall state of the business.
Kind of leaning in a little bit on the dynamic of figuring out their relationship, hearing a lot about, having transparency, having expectations around deliverables and kind of status of the relationship. Curious to hear about, let's say you're in a position either on the PE side or on the company side where it's a relatively new relationship. We're still in the figuring out how you work phase. Curious to hear advice for someone who is coming into the private equity space and figuring out a new relationship, and what's a way to maximize efficiency other than just being smart and figuring it out. What are pieces of advice you might have for someone who's trying to enter into this new relationship and quickly get up to speed and identify the values that are going to be shared with their respective partner? And why don't we go in reverse order? So Jose, why don't you start with this one?
Yes. There's usually a lot of market research, white space studies, an investment thesis deck, bankers decks. There's a lot of materials that the private equity firm has before they make the actual investment. They've been looking at it probably for 12 or 18 months, even longer than that. So if you have access or you can ask for a lot of those materials, it's really helpful to help you personally understand where they're coming from and what is the desired outcome. What I love about private equity is that you have a restricted horizon. So you're usually playing around 5 years. It could go up to 7, it could go down to 2.5 or 3, but you know it's roughly 5. So you know the space, you know the thesis, you know the time. Then how are we going to partner around resources? It's usually very different than a publicly traded company. There's a lot more constraint around resources, and it almost helps you be more creative. Like at Burger King, every executive had 2 or 3 titles. So it was a cost-cutting exercise. We took millions and millions of dollars out, but you ended up being the GC, the head of HR, and the chief technology officer, right? So you need to have that flexibility too. But the more you understand upfront, the better the relationship gets over time.
I think that's a great point. And for me, I tend to come in mid-hold. So I always ask what was the original deal that what are the objectives for overall business acquisitions that have been done? Because typically in PE, right, we're doing a lot of M&A activity. I don't know if I say fortunately or unfortunately, there's always been 4 or 5 deals that have been done and not integrated. So getting the information together, and then I quickly make sure I visit all of the sites. It's important to know the portfolio companies, the people on-prem, and then also with the sponsor. Meet the sponsor pretty regularly just to ensure that I know what they're trying to achieve. And there's just a lot that happens. And I tend to lean pretty heavily on our bankers. And so when I say bankers, it's the deal folks, right, who are coming in to help you the transaction. I'm always asking them, what is happening in the market? What are you seeing? What are you seeing of activity in our space? What are adjacencies we should be looking at? Because not only, because if you want to make sure that your alignment with the sponsor, but also I like to bring new opportunities as well. Have we thought of this? This would be a quick add-on adjacency that gets us a faster growth revenue, which in turn gets you, more creative EBITDA. So we're going to put that.
I would go 3 things, and my background's leadership development, and so looking at what makes executives successful. And the 3 things I see is that curiosity, asking questions, right? You're coming into a new environment. It's a new leadership team. It's potentially a new sponsor. And so you should really ask a lot of questions, that curiosity. The second, where I've seen leaders derail, is having an ego. There is a piece of humility. There's a team that built to where it was. There's a team that's trying to get it to where it is. And so coming in and assuming you have all the answers, you know everything, that's going to be a misstep in that relationship part. And it's also going to be a misstep in really where the organization is going. And then I think the third piece is, and I think there's a theme, is speed. And I think you mentioned decision making. You can't get to 100%. And so where we've seen leaders early on not do well is they've waited till they had all the information before they made a decision. And so that speed for your decision making and being comfortable with 80% is really important in those early stages.
I think I'll take a different angle and go onto the really interpersonal side of this with the leaders that I engage with. I try and sit down with each of them and for their teams underneath and understand what makes them feel valued, empowered, respected. What do they need from our dialogue, from our relationship? I found in many cases those leaders, it's not their first PE foray, and they've maybe had some experiences that weren't so great. There's a reason we're all in the room today trying to figure out what PE is, and there are some examples in the past, the corporate raider types and so forth. They can be less than pleasant, on a day-to-day basis. And so some people may come in with some reservations, some scar tissue, some lack of trust, but in our case, doing complex carve-outs, we're often elevating leaders who have never been accountable at the top of their function. And so helping them understand, just from a personal development side, what do you need to see? What do you need to be exposed to? Where are the gaps in your game that I can help you develop? Because my goal is to get you to a place where you're, able to succeed both in this portfolio company and have a successful life and career beyond, and unpacking some of that interpersonal dynamic as we're going to work together every day and every month. it goes beyond the KVDs, it goes beyond the goals, it goes beyond the investment thesis. It just gets down to human relationships and knowing that the people are in a place of safety to do their job, provided that they deliver the things we need delivered.
Yeah, it's this idea of building a relationship, particularly if you're coming in new, is a good question. You know, I think a lot of great comments from the rest of the panelists. There's so many things that get into it, but it, if I was to like nail down one thing that's always needed is it's just trust. You want to be able to trust the person. If you trust somebody, you have a relationship with that person. And so what goes into trust, you know, like this is no different than, you know, a relationship with your spouse or anyone else. You want a great relationship, you need to have the intimacy. So you need to know the person. You need to, you know, spend time with them. What else? You know, you need to be able to rely on me. If I need to do what I say I'm going to do. You need to have a measure of subject matter expertise, right? You got to know what you're talking about. But in addition to that, I think there is a aspect of how you interact in terms of your agenda, and that is, I generally believe you need to have low self-orientation. People are smart. People recognize your agenda right away. So you just need to have a general interest in understanding and caring about what matters to them. You just have to, and they'll sniff that out immediately. And so that low self-orientation, that doesn't mean that you have no agenda yourself. It doesn't mean that you don't have goals. It's not what I'm saying. But you need to have that low self-orientation, generally care about the success of the person we're talking about, whether that's your boss, whether that's a private equity firm, whether that's your peers, whether that's suppliers, whether that's customers. There's so many different, relationships, and you do those basic things, you're going to build trust, and that trust is going to pay dividends in all your relationships.
Sorry,
Go ahead, do it.
I talk too much. Two more things that I thought about. One around trust. I agree 1,000%. Keep in mind that they're not your friends, right? As you get to know them and you see them in the boardroom, they're incredibly smart. They're great people, but they're not your friend. They're your boss. And there's
Jose,
there's a
say it isn't so.
sorry. I'm just joking. So because through my experience, you make mistakes, right? It's like that. You think so, then you try, and you're like, that's not the way this is going to work. The second one, as you're assessing the opportunity, I forgot to mention two things. The debt structure of the business. I would double click, triple click on that, because sometimes that is not shared. I worked for one that they didn't share that up front, and then we got in trouble. And then all the audited financials, they should have that, and that's another good data set to go review in detail. And even if you don't understand, you can ask the accountant, you can ask the bank, but get familiar with how they've been reporting the numbers and the debt structure.
Can I say one more thing too? Sorry, it's something you said struck a,
We are your friends.
Life is too short too, because we're talking about building relationships. Life is too short. Nobody wants to work with an asshole. Sorry if I just swore, but nobody does. And so don't be that way. The other thing is funny because Jose and we were talking about a company we independently we were kind of interacting with. He was potentially going to be the next CEO. We were looking at investing, and the other thing I would say is we just don't do crazy. And so we know a person, and we obviously won't share, but don't be crazy. And like this seems, I'm purposely trying to be funny, but we're talking about building relationships here. People look, most of us would probably rather be on the beach, right? But at the end of the day, we got to work. We got to take care of our families, whatever. We want to enjoy everything. So, don't be that guy. Or the cow.
I was gonna say he's spot on because although we're joking about it, it happens. And I have a general rule that I don't work for anybody. He's sure. And so, and it's easy to say, right? You don't always have to. You have to respect who you work with, and you have to make sure you're transparent. It doesn't mean you have to like them, and you're definitely your board members are not your friends. And so, there's so many people in the executive space get caught up in that. Oh, I'll just call such and so because they're my buddy. We're not your buddy, right? There are we're recording to, and they have a strategic agenda to achieve. And then you spot on the leverage of a business, and you look at the debts in private equity. The businesses are pretty levered, heavily levered. So you have to be aware of that. So I'm always not only asking for what does that structure, what are the covenants look like for the past year or so. So you're aware of the cycles and seasonality in your business. And additionally to that, I always want to see the cash flow. What does it look like? What was the target 13-week and what do we actually achieve? You learn a lot in that because it's not just revenue, right? It's profitable revenue. And then it also, there's operational cycles within the business. Every business has them, but in private equity, because you're going fast and you're doing acquisitions, you always need to be planning for the surprise.
And if you don't ask, so many of you have been through a search process or you're leading a search for your team. If the candidate doesn't ask, that also tells you a little something on their business acumen. And so you should ask, and they're gonna give you an NDA, they're gonna share what they're comfortable, but asking those questions. The other part, the relationship piece, this is a really networked business. This is a really networked industry. And not only do PE sponsors have reputations, executives in the PE space have reputations. And so every executive search we've run, we back channel. We back channel because we want to find the crazy because we don't want the crazy either.
100%.
We run a background check. It's extremely expensive for every senior person, and it's to find the crazy ones. And we have not hired people because of what comes back in that report. And if everyone gives you their references, they're going to be the good references. You want to call the ones that are not going to be good.
I've got a couple more questions that are prepared, but I think we've got about 10 more minutes left in the panel. I want to make sure we provide opportunity for anyone that has any question, either following on that we've discussed where you want to dive deeper or that we haven't touched on that you're interested in. So I guess taking a quick break and surveying the crowd. Does anyone have any questions that they want to make sure that we address? Go ahead.
That's my CFO. Okay. So she's been waiting for this moment. She's going to ask Matt a really hard question.
And I'll defer to Jennifer.
So it's so interesting. There's so many business roll-ups, business services roll-ups that are happening right now. And in the PE space, sometimes your objectives, your financial objectives, and then the long-term objectives for the business, i.e. culture, which is what really drives a business services organization. I've watched Ellen really, really feel fully balance those two, and I'm actually going to direct this to you, Ellen, and for everybody else to chime in. But how have you managed that transition from a 300-person organization to almost 2,000 with much bigger goals?
It's funny. So I have a new HR manager that started, and she's been with us for about 90 days. And we met yesterday to just do a one-on-one touch base. And she said, "You guys are really nice." She's like, "But you're nice in the business sense." And so I think when you're thinking about business services, our company, we don't make anything. So our company, our value proposition is our people and how we deliver that to the people. So it means sometimes you have to make decisions that maybe aren't necessarily as comfortable, but you're doing it from a long term. So we've done 55 acquisitions, and there are times that our insurance platform is more expensive than what they were paying. And so we do an offset. We try to keep people whole. And so you look at how do you balance the decision of meeting your financial needs, but at the same time, this is a long-term view of how do you take care of your people. And I really believe that if you take care of your people, they will take care of your business. And you have to be really, really honest and clear about here's why we're doing something and connecting it back to, we've decided not to raise our medical premiums this year. And I fought tooth and nail. Carrie was a great partner, but it's going to be a significant impact. And it's for the retention and how do you drive that to the employee population. And I don't know, we still haven't figured it out, and thank you for that, but I'd love to hear from the rest of the group. How do you balance that?
I got a question for you. That was a great answer. How do you have that courageous conversation when you do have seemingly competing, goals, right? Obviously, we want to do right by our employees, but at the same time, we need to be profitable. So maybe, how do you have that courageous conversation for the long term?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think you have to have your data. So you have to know things like retention rate. You have to know how do your resources translate into business results. Because if I just come in and say, gosh, this is the right thing to do because it feels good, it's not going to win me a whole lot of friends in the boardroom. But if I come in and I say, here's where our retention, here are the benchmarks of what I'm seeing in the rest of the market, and you bring in hard data to support it and show our people will drive that value proposition, that's something that's worked for me.
I think that it creates an inflection point. We had 2,000 employees. We bought a business that had 3,000, so now we have 5,000. The first thing we did was 9 roadshows where we sat across from every single site manager, and we asked where you came from, what were the good things they were doing and the bad things they were doing. And then we collected all that data. And in that inflection point, it gave us the opportunity to create our new vision, mission, values, and they felt they had input into what we had created. We absorbed some of the cost of the benefits. We took the equity down to the district level. So now I can sit across from a district manager and they have the same equity that I have. And for 16 years, I fought for that. And the other 7 private equity firms said no. And Oaktree said yes. And that just changes the way we align objectives, the way we talk about it. The hardest challenge there is they've never been through a wealth creation event and they don't know what we're talking about. So there's a lot of education around what will this mean when it happens, with all the disclaimers that you can imagine.
I would add as well communication, right? It's what we're all talking about. Over communicate, because the majority of the teams don't know what we're talking about. You acquire businesses that haven't had a seat at the table. They don't understand the financial impact. They definitely don't understand the wealth creation that can occur. And similarly, we drive it all the way down to each of the locations so that management has skin in the game, if you will. And then continually communicating with lots of disclaimers. This is what it could get like, and being honest, right? So when we report out at the end of the month our financials, we don't necessarily give them play by play, but we say at the percentage, this is what we've achieved and this is what it could mean to you longer term, right? And so if you're not communicating, especially when you're doing a ton of acquisitions, it really, really can be impactful, because people are like, who are these people? What are they talking about? I see it every single day, especially post-acquisition.
I think the number one truism I think that we've all learned over our careers is growth creates opportunity. And how you message that at each level of the organization, at least in our space, companies often haven't had a great vision for where they're headed, or it hasn't been clear, whether it's growth or whether it's transformation. People want to show up to work feeling empowered and connected to what they're doing. And I do think there's an opportunity through communication, through goal setting, through so forth to make sure people have a reason for being there. And at the end of the day, if we've done well, there's more employees working for the company than there were when we made the acquisition. There's more revenue for the company. There's more new positions. There's more innovation. There's things that they can latch onto. Of course, the fundamentals have to be there of gain sharing and participating in that success. But part of it just intrinsically is, why am I here? Why do I show up to work every day? And how let's not understate how important that is to a rank and file employee who, whether they're working machine press or running the finance organization, it matters to everybody.
In the growth world, real quick, actually, let's keep going. Somebody else had a question.
Yeah, hi. My name's Neil. I really appreciate the diverse perspective. I have a question specifically on the evolution of the workforce as AI is coming into play. From my perspective, I think the human element is more important than it's ever been. And there's 2 aspects. One is the workforce is being anchored in
just real quick, I want to be respectful to our partners at AccruePartners, and I know we're very close to the end of time, and that's a big bucket of issue, integration of AI and how that is impacting PE operations. So, a desire not to make everybody go way late, curious if we could keep it to like very concise points, so that we can wrap up.
I can take it from a technology perspective. Whether you're talking industrial automation or whether you're talking artificial intelligence, I think the strong view of value cases, I think there's a lot of money being thrown at problems without directing it appropriately. I think that's why you see people say that 80% of those investments in the chat GPTs and so forth or initiatives don't achieve their value is because they are, you can put it at the doorstep, but if you don't drive it through the company and do it purposefully, it doesn't land. I think we will see that transformation of roles in the way that search took us from having to memorize and remember things when I was in school, to that information being at our fingertips. Doesn't change the fact that we all have to know how to apply it, and I think there are people who feel that that's a silver bullet or an easy button that allows them to skip steps in building good companies. And I think as a ownership group, we're very disciplined about those investments because we can see how you can spend a lot of money without the return. It will change the workforce, and I'll let others speak to from the HR perspective of how you see that pragmatically.
I would just go really quickly. It changes where your critical thinking happens. That's it. That is all it does. It enables where the critical thinking, so where people can spend their time that's going to drive more value, find that technology that'll do that. So then, because you're using less resources, but think about where the critical thinking is happening in your organization.
I'll share one philosophical point and one tactical point. We just had a CEO summit down in Palmetto Bluffs where we had over 40 executives, past, present, and future. Really great event. We had a couple AI speakers, but a couple of takeaways. One is AI is a disruptive technology, and if you go back into the 90s, if you're like me, who young adult in the 90s, the internet we didn't know what to make of it initially. You have everybody along the spectrum. Some people who just loved it, some people who resisted it. But if you and the fear was, hey, it's going to eliminate all these jobs. And the truth of the matter is some jobs went away, but a whole lot of new jobs were created in whole new economies. This whole idea of e-commerce, like now it's ubiquitous. Everybody who doesn't shop on Amazon, but that didn't exist back then. And so there's a whole new economy that likely will come about. Another great example is, the light bulb. There's a whole industry around candles and lamps and all that, even in the cities, right? But it truly transformed society. So it's likely to be similar. And what the future has, nobody knows for sure. But I think there's going to be pros and cons with everything. But likely there's jobs that will go away, new jobs that are created. I generally think because it's a productivity enhancement, it's going to drive the macroeconomic GDP growth. But then on the practical side, I would just say, just get started. Don't overthink it. Just jump in, get to know it. And the leaders, the Jose's, the Jennifers, the Ellens of the world, or executives, you set the tone for not only AI, but everything else. And so inspire your people. Of course, put in a policy. Of course, have some governance. But unleash the creativity, the critical thinking, the strength of your people so that they become force multipliers. And be that inspiring person versus the restrictor. That's my guy.
And I would say, I would add to that, we use AI from access to information faster, right? So it's going out to my server, it's pulling all data related to a topic that I asked for. So it enables my people to make decisions faster. And so 100% agree with speed of information. It allows people to spend more time doing analytics and applying the human perspective on the data you compiled versus spending 4 or 5 hours getting all the data together and compiling it. So I look at it and enable their workforce multiplication over time. And definitely there's going to be industries that come alongside that are going to and grow very quickly.
I think that's our time. I want to thank the panel. I learned a lot. I hope you all did too. Thank you for AccruePartners for hosting us. Really enjoyed the event, and thanks for coming, everyone.